There is a mindset shift that could transform the way you look at your business and the profitability of your dairy farm. In fact, a former dairy manager himself came across this way of thinking years ago before going on to eventually serve as the CEO of the largest software company in the dairy industry. And 7 years ago, he founded Milc Group to deliver data-driven solutions to dairy producers. And today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, we sit down with Manuel Soares to find out what motivated him to start looking at dairy profitability differently, and how he and his team at Milc Group apply manufacturing principles to dairy farming to identify and eliminate bottlenecks to improve revenues. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen, and this is the podcast for dairy farm owners, managers, and advisors who are committed to profitability, sustainability, and excellence. And it's my mission to bring you the conversations that will up-level your skill set and your mindset so you can be a top performer in the dairy farming business. This episode is brought to you by Milc Group. Milc Group is a dairy software company that brings real-time actionable data to dairy farms around the world. They are dedicated to revolutionizing the dairy industry with their user-friendly cloud-based software. One by Milc Group is the all-in-one app that brings together all important aspects of your dairy in one place. With products such as feed and animal management software, people training, dairy facility monitoring, and scale management, Milc Group is committed to providing producers with the tools they need to succeed. Manuel, you started out your career as a dairy manager, and there was a pivotal point that really shifted the way you started to look at dairy profitability. And it really is what set you on this trajectory to empower other producers through data to make informed decisions. Take us back to that experience.
I was managing dairies at this time, 32, 35 years ago. And I had someone who I thought was quite brilliant at the time told me that if I ever want to be successful in dairy, go look at manufacturing. Go read a book from manufacturing. And I did. And it has helped me in managing dairies, managing value ag software, to starting a new company. And that is because all systems have bottlenecks. And all about manufacturing is to eliminate bottlenecks. It's about flow per hour. If you think about, I've got a machine. So let's just walk through this a little bit. What is a dairy? It literally is manufacturing. We just happen to be manufacturing milk. Ultimately, we're all manufacturing cash. It's all about revenues. It's not about the cow. It's not about the milk. We can talk about all of the social side. We love the business. The animal needs to be taken care of. Let's just set that aside for a second. As business owners, what we need to do is look at the revenue created. And you have to think of it a bit like a manufacturing plant, because every single one of these robots makes something that create revenue. So if I've got a robot that works half the time and the other robot works 100% of the time, what am I going to do? I'm going to preface this by saying, if you're a small farm, this is going to sound harsh, but we all have limitations. We have limitations on land, facility, funding. We have a lot of different limitations. But it's the concept that I'm trying to get through, okay? So if we've got robots that do not run 24/7 and have the same output as their cohorts, we got a problem because we're restricting revenue. What are the different systems on our dairy that can cause us a revenue shortage? It's the animal, it's the barn, it's the corrals. There's a lot of different things, right? So we have to look at the stall. If you think about the business as a amount of revenue per hour I make, because remember, your expenses are spending 24/7. They don't stop just while you're milking. When you stop milking cows, your expenses don't stop, okay? So you have to think about that in the big picture. We don't always look at milk produced in a 24-hour period if the barn is only running 6 hours a day. We should, because it's all about efficiency. And I'll give the analogy. Let's say that I run trucks. Let's call it milk trucks. I got a truck and trailer that runs 1 day a week. I've got another truck that runs 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Do I have a problem with the one that only runs 1 day a week? Absolutely, because it still costs me interest. I've got a payment. I have to have labor because I can't lay them off and hire them back for the day. So I've got these expenses, but I've got no revenue generated for 6 days another week. You can think about this in an individual animal, which I think we ultimately have to get to, or we can look at it as a stall or an empty stall on a barn, on a dairy, right? So these are all things you know. But if you start to think about things in a bigger picture and more about what's the revenue that I make through these tasks or through these individual limitations, whether it be a stall, whether it be the cow itself, right? That really starts to change the way you look at your business, right? Some of these we don't even look at. What is the animal per employee? What is the ratio of how many animals or how many people it takes for how many animals? Looking at the breakdown between the number of people, how many of us don't pay attention to this, right? I'm very cognizant of it. I got to make sure I've got enough support staff. I got to have enough developers. I've got to look forward. I can't look where I'm at today. You guys have to do the same as you're building and looking at the struggles that you have going forward. Some of these metrics, do you look at? What is the flow per hour? If you look at the overall milk production per hour, you can see some of your times a day where you're peaking in milk, for example. Can the barn handle it? There's some answers to some questions you should be asking yourself. If I got a lot of milk being pulled, I'm hearing 110-pound average in some cases. Do they flood your pipeline? Are you starting to have some issues that you may not pay attention to? And it only happens when you're peak production, right? So you got to be careful of those types of things. What's your net per animal? This is a real problem in our industry. And my grandfather used to always say that we're cash poor in the dairy industry. And I'll give you some reasons why. It's an equity business in most cases, right? We're trading paper and we're paying off that one entity, but we're never getting past, and here's some of the reasons why, is everything that happens on the dairy, we're disconnected from. We have variables that other manufacturings don't have because we have a live animal. Weather influences, the feed influences, the animal itself, whether it gets sick or off feed or some human being screws up somehow, moves her, she's got a new pecking order. I mean, we can go on and list a gazillion reasons we have variables. What we're trying to do is connect all the dots for you.
So essentially, you are taking what some very sophisticated companies would do manually on spreadsheets and automating and aggregating this information for decision-making purposes. And up until this point, that has been the best way to do it. But you're saying there is a risk that comes with that. Where is the room for error?
Because you can't tell whether it's real or not real. You got to be really careful of that. And that's not sustainable when you're looking at all of us moving much faster than we have to move today, right? So if you look at what we're building as a company, it's what you would call an ecosystem or an ERP. For those of you who don't know what an ERP is, this is what most manufacturing plants use. It brings all of the connected data directly or loosely. It brings that all into a system that allows you to look at cause and effect, income over. So you're starting to look at feasibility, profitability on a business unit. Now you can say, well, at the end of the year, I go look at how much money I made. That's the aftermath. We need to be much more proactive on the front end to decide the things that we do and don't do and the changes that we make way before the negative happens, right? The only way you do that is have enough data to make those decisions. So if you think about the different pieces that are up there, logistics, we're going to be moving and digitizing everything in and out of the dairy. Processes could be our herd management, could be our feed management. You have inventory, whether it be feed, cattle, fuel, seed, doesn't matter. Inventorying over time, silages, human resources. Why would we build a human resource module? For all of you, you want to look at the feasibility of your labor. How many people do I have? Do I have enough? Do I not have enough? And how do I analyze the success of one employee over another doing the same job? How do I measure that today? It's all gut. It's really hard to get a good, real view. It's a single source of truth. You have to know that the facts you're looking at are real and not my assumption. We make a lot of assumptions in dairy. But if you just look around, it really encompasses the whole dairy. Well, that's Milc Group's goal, right? We've got herd management, feed management, we've got facility, we've got training, we're building an HR, we'll have a farm module. And the whole purpose of this is to connect all those dots for people to be able to do all the analytics. We're getting ready to roll out analytics early next year, and that's to do all those things, do math, make visualizations that make sense. It's been created and related already for you so that you can actually put insights together to make sense. Because again, it's all about deciding.
You just said it's all about deciding. And you talk about the speed of decision making. Why does this matter in any business, and how does it relate back to data for a dairy producer?
Business is all about decisions, and how fast you make them determines whether you succeed or fail. Speed in which you decide will make the difference. I've got to do a contract, and I've got an opportunity right now to decide, should I buy this property? Should I sell these animals? It's usually based on time. The faster you can make decisions, because you have all the information in a way that can be consumed by you, then you can make decisions quickly. But I just want to remind you, why are we a cash poor business quite often? Set aside the high margins at times we have that are flukes, right? You get high dollar milk and low costs, and sometimes we make some good money, and then we go long term down and struggle and get beat up a little bit. We all get nervous. We end up trading dollars on an animal. So if you look at the cost, $3,300 in California for a pregnant animal, pregnant heifer, doesn't mean she's close to calving, just a pregnant animal. So it can get quite expensive. But I just threw up $2,500. And if you look at the milk income at 18 cents, it depends on where you live, of course, but just threw the number out there, that's $18 milk, right? Let's say that the heifer on average with her curve is 68 pounds, right? So she starts low, she peaks, she drops. Let's just say she's 68. We could play numbers all day long, but let's just say that. If we look at the cost of dry cows, because you're going to have a dry period before she comes in her second lactation. You've got feed per day. You've got down at the bottom, you got your income. It's going to take you 2 lactations just for this animal to pay the $2,500 back before you make a dime. And that's not including what her cost is while she's in your milk string. The semen, the labor, remember, my pickup truck, my vacation, and all my investments, all my labor, all the supplies all come from that milk cow. So if you take all those expenses and divide it out against the milk, then there's your portion of all the other expenses. So this is just saying that $2,500 replacement fee. So if you look at the high dollars today, what is that, 4 lactations before she starts making me money? I'm going to run milk. It's going to take me 2 years before I make a dime off this truck. I'm just trying to pay its payments. This is the same thing, right? So it kind of gets you thinking about, where's the money? Well, the money is in longevity. It's all about the 4th, 5th, 6th lactations that are producing well and getting pregnant. That's where I make all my money because I paid off her old debt. Why do I bring this up? Because data needs to tell you this instantly. You have to be able to pick up your phone at any given time and say, am I making money today or am I losing money today? And what is my margin? Because if I'm going to have a conversation about managing risk, I better know my position. And I better know now so I could take advantage of what's happening in the market. And I can't have a bunch of data divers building it when I need it, because I probably need it when they're not available, right? They're the doers. I'm just thinking about how I can give them the power to make those decisions and trust the data because it's real. Let's talk a little bit about being careful. Matter of fact, most mistakes are made on a dairy through Excel because most people don't understand the data sets that are coming from Dairy Comp, Feed, Easy Feed, DHI Plus, whatever, right? They don't understand how it's created. And you can make big mistakes when you make some assumptions. So just be aware, okay? Work with people who understand data, but that's what we're trying to eliminate.
So what are some of the decisions that you believe dairy owners and managers could really hone in on? The types of decisions that, as you mentioned, that speed of decision making earlier, that could truly make a difference in real-time profitability.
Every metric or every outcome or result has a benefit. If we can do it timely, quickly, accurately, it makes the difference between us making good decisions and bad decisions on a dairy. So some of the things you think about is animal flow. If I look at what's going on in the barn and I look at the moving through the barn, am I getting slower? Am I getting faster? Is it directly related to production? Is it directly related to how dirty the cows are coming in? What are those metrics that tell us you're inefficient? There's more speed that you have there without giving anything away. You may make a lot of flow changes just on where you store your cow. If you have cows that are pretty far away that you got to go get, what is the loss in energy to get into your barn to get milk? These are things you have to start to think about. We're assuming that we end up like the pigs and chickens, very low margin for sustained amount of time. We want to make sure we know what that is and we can capitalize on every possibility. That's what we've got to prepare for. Cull strategy changes, right? I've got all these heifers coming in. Do I replace heifers with cows? Or wait a minute, I may find that I should keep the cow who's making me money right now, and I don't necessarily need the heifers as long as the status of the herd is healthy, right? Where you have the right percentage in each group of age. I need to know that, and I need to know the effect of that as it changes. So my strategy will change. And if I'm moving towards beef on dairy, my strategy would have been very different than if it wasn't beef on dairy. I hear this all the time. Well, I'm kind of late to the beef on dairy. It kind of depends on what country and what was the price of beef. But in our own country, or even the States, we've got people deciding to go beef on dairy way too late. That's delayed decision making that costs us a lot of money, right? Again, just trying to point out the obvious. Genetic strategy, right? I'm going to sit down with my rep and say, hey, what are the traits that I should be focusing on to get a longer lasting cow? Because if I have an animal that produces 100 pounds or 90 pounds, the 90 pounds might be a better buy if the longevity of that animal is, I'm making this up, 10 lactations versus 2, right? I never made any money on her. I just literally paid back her debt and then she went to beef. What's the average lactation in US? 2.5, 2.6. If this earlier spreadsheet is 2 lactations just to pay her previous debt and the price of replacements have gone up, your interest has gone up, your labor has gone up, how long before she makes you a dime? You need to know what that is.
Now, that said, Manuel, you are bringing to light 2 major challenges for dairy producers in the ability to make informed decisions quickly. And that's 1, the challenge of truly knowing your costs, and 2, knowing your cost in a business with constantly changing variables.
If you don't know what cost of production is and where you break even, which is really damn hard, by the way, because it changes every day. It's something you need to know, though, because it does have an impact on your decision making. If I said, it's $19 break even, I've got $18 milk. Do I lock it in right now? That's a strategy of, is the milk expected to go to 15? But if the milk is supposed to hover there, I would never lock my loss in. These are things you have to think of quickly. I'm the business owner who has to look at those positions to see what makes sense for my decision, right?
Now, timely data is one thing, but there's another piece to this puzzle, and that's accuracy. What are the risks and challenges around data accuracy in the dairy industry?
There's a concept in data. When I hear cleaning data, it makes people like me really nervous. It's called skewing data if you're not careful, right? You have to kind of work with data to make sure that you fix your inputs. Most of you probably have a single 1 or 2 PCs and only 2 people enter data. That's a problem because it's not the one doing the work, doing the data entry, and you get dyslexia, you get somebody who's fast keying, and I hit an error and I go, well, shoot, I don't know. I wasn't the one doing this. Enter, right? You have a lot of issues with data integrity. The other thing that happens is I'm an employee. I see a problem, the cow's lame, whatever, abort. I'm going to write this on a piece of paper, I'm going to stick it in my pocket and give it to the herdsman when I see him. Probably won't always happen.
So how is what you are doing through the one platform helping to solve this data accuracy problem?
It's why we're cloud. That's why it's in a mobile device. Anyone and everyone can enter data. It's controlled, and you have an audit trail. So you can say, hey, what did Derek do today? And go look at all of their inputs. It's really restricting. When I was at Valley Ag, we'd have a lot of the pharmaceutical companies come in and say, can you convince dairymen to enter all these health events? Because we're trying to analyze them. No, we can't, right? Because there's limiting factors. Here's a piece of paper full of rain and snow, and I'm handing it in, and people are trying to figure out what to type in the computer. It happens all the time. Be careful of data entry and what you receive you may think is real. Make sure that the process of data entry and what is an illness, is this a new mastitis or a continuation of mastitis, changes the result of that answer, right? So be very mindful of that, and you'll go a long way.
So one thing we haven't touched on here is data ownership. Let's go there.
So data is profit. And the one thing I want you to know is your data worth money to you. Don't give it away. Don't allow people to take it. Hide it, lock it down, because it is your intellectual property. So make sure you understand at some point, it is part of our goal to make sure that people can access your data with your only permission, because you own it, not us, at a fee, right? So you can start to monetize and have some restrictions on how long that lives, right? You have to think about, you are competing against your neighbor, and it's important for you to understand that if someone like me took a backup from whatever system, we could figure out what is making you successful. That's a problem, right? Because we're competing against each other. We'll help each other in this room. We're cheerleaders for each other in this room, but ultimately all of you dairy producers do compete. You want to really make sure that data is yours, and whoever you work with says the same and actually follows through with that.
What do you believe it takes for a dairy producer to be able to compete in today's market and into the future?
It's that drive to succeed at all costs. You know, what do we need to do? How do we teach ourselves to be better? How do we make a better team? Because it always boils down to the people, not the products or the technology, even in our company. It's the team. So I think it's just really important that whether you are taking over from family legacies or not, you've got to continually reinvent yourself. The way we dairy is changed. And if you think it's changed a lot in the last 5, I would say it hasn't changed very much. Changing forward is going to be very fast, and it's going to be required to stay in the business. We're going to see much tighter margins for a lot longer. So you've got to really be thinking about how to manage going forward, breaking up their systems to try to manage the system rather than the whole dairy. You can't bite the whole elephant. You need to do a bite at a time. And what kind of the metrics you have to look at and why some of the things happen the way they do in the business today.
You just heard from Manuel Soares, CEO of Milc Group. Check out their solutions for dairy farmers and more in the show notes below. This episode is brought to you by Milc Group. Milc Group is a dairy software company that brings real-time actionable data to dairy farms around the world. They are dedicated to revolutionizing the dairy industry with their user-friendly cloud-based software. One by Milc Group is the all-in-one app that brings together all important aspects of your dairy in one place. With products such as feed and animal management software, people training, dairy facility monitoring, and scale management, Milc Group is committed to providing producers with the tools they need to succeed.